Okay, we're ready for session 4. Everybody ready? Yes. I like that, Emily. Yes. Okay, again, why are we here today? Learn how to read the Bible better. That's right. Now, this may be the most challenging session of the day. Not because of the content, but because it's number 4 in a lineup, and it's right before lunch. So please don't let the smells distract you, okay? So focus, okay? All right. When we lived in Georgia in the early 90s, my husband and my children and I, a friend called one evening, and she said, the circus is coming to town. Lives a little town. She said, the circus is coming to town, and we're going to go watch them set up the tents tomorrow. You want to come? But you have to get, it's early. It's like really early in the morning. And I think I had 3 at that time, 3 kids at that time. And but then she said something. I was like, why would I want to go watch that? She said, they use elephants to set up the tents. Has anybody ever seen that?
No.
Oh. Andy has, yes. Okay, and she remembers it. Okay, it was very memorable because we get there early in the morning. I mean, the sun's barely up, and the tents are all spread out, and they've got some kind of things holding them up on the side, but they're kind of collapsed. But there's these 2 huge elephants. Well, they're all huge, but there's 2 elephants, and they have harnesses on, and then they have these tethers, and the tethers are attached to the center poles of the circus tent. And then on a signal, there's a signal, and then they just start walking. The elephants just, walk along like an elephant walks away from the tent, and little by little, eventually the tent pole comes full upright, and the tent just swells into full shape. It's just amazing. If you ever get the chance to see that, it happens. It happens in Oregon too, so look for that. Anyway, these poles were the main component of the structure of the circus tent. So in this session, we are going to talk about learning how to uncover the structure of a text. And here's our principle. Every text has a structure. The structure will reveal an emphasis. The emphasis should shape our understanding. So let's refer back to your pathway to application diagram to see where structure comes in. It's actually in the same place as context to understand what the author's intended meaning was to his original audience, the them then. So we need to identify the context of the text, the literary and historical context, but we also need to identify or uncover the structure of the text. Why? Okay, so let's look at our principle again. Every text has a structure. The structure will reveal what? An emphasis. And the emphasis should shape our understanding. We're trying to get to that understanding of what the author's what the intended meaning was for the original audience. So that's what we're looking for, the understanding of that. And structure is important to most things in life. And text structures refer to the way an author organizes information in the text. Recognizing underlying structure of a text can help the reader focus on key concepts and relationships and will aid in comprehension. So we're looking for structure. So our diagram for structure is the circus tent. So you can draw that in your little box, and you're going to draw it later on your refresh page. And if you want to do a variation of it, feel free. But make it simple so it's easy to do and remember. So it's going to be the circus tent. So we're going to look at a great example of how to find structure, how structure will reveal an emphasis. So we're going to look at Matthew 5. We've just been through the Sermon on the Mount at church, and this passage is in that Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is talking, so you'll see red letters in your Bible if you have a red letter edition. So turn to Matthew 5. And we're going to look at the passage, and I'm going to look at verse 21. So here we go. We're looking for structure. So in verse 21, it says, Jesus is talking. He says, "You have heard it said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who's angry with his brother will be liable to judgment." And it goes on. And then in verse 27, we see, "You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in her heart." Verse 31, "It was also said, whoever divorces his wife," and it goes on. Verse 12, it says, "But I say to you," and Jesus completes that. Verse 33, "Again you have heard it said to those of old, you shall not swear." In verse 34, it says, "But I say to you," and Jesus says what he says, "do not take an oath at all." Verse 38, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you," and he finishes that. In verse 43, "You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." So in this passage, we see repetition with this pattern. You have heard it said, but I say to you. So that's a structure we're seeing. This technique of finding the structure then will reveal what? An emphasis. So we're going to look for the emphasis. What is the emphasis here? Jesus is referencing laws here, but he's reinterpreting the law by showing that it's not about moralism or legalism, the letter of the law, but that there's more to it, that there's an inner heart component. So keep in mind the principle. Every text has a structure. The structure will reveal an emphasis, and the emphasis should shape our understanding to get to the author's original intended meaning, and inevitably to application for us. So let's look. You want to find that tent pole. If you look inside the tent, you see the tent pole, and you see what's holding the weight, what's given it structure. You're seeing that that's a main component. And so what you're looking for in your passage, you're looking for that emphasis. That's what you're hunting for in the structure. The structure will give an emphasis. So there's some strategies that we're going to look at, and you're on page 9. So on strategies, when we're reading, there's some strategies that help us see structure and kind of the terrain of the text. So number one thing I do, I like to, if I'm studying, really, really studying one, I will print off a double space passage, just print it off, and so you can work on it and you can look at it and see what you're going to see, because you kind of have to, some structures are very easy. I think this one in Matthew is very easy to see, but the one we just went over. But some of them are a little bit harder to see, so there's some strategies to finding it. And so one of them is you look for repetition. You look for words and phrases that you see over and over in this passage. Ideas that are repeated. Another strategy is look for compare and contrast. Look for those types of examples where, like in Psalm 1, the tree planted, the righteous man and the evil man, the sitting and standing and walking. There's a compare and contrast in that Psalm 1. You're also going to look, number 3, you're going to look for shifts or transitions. like therefore or if then. So these are going to be some logical thought flows that you're looking for. That's part of structure. So you're looking for these shifts. Notice grammar. Number 4, notice grammar. That would be lists of things or verbs. Notice verbs and even notice the tense of the verb. You'll see in a passage where it'll go from one tense, it'll go to present tense to go to future tense or past tense to present tense. So look for the tenses of verbs. Look at the pronouns. Is it I or you or he? Look at the pronouns. So grammar's key in looking for structure. Number 5, look at the beginning and the end. Sometimes that reveals structure. I know when we were in speech and debate, that was something that, when we were teaching our kids to do a speech, we would teach them, tell them up front in the introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then in the conclusion, you tell them what you told them. So, and sometimes in Scripture, you'll find that. You'll find that kind of that process, that beginning and the end. And then the 6th thing is recognize the type of text you're reading. So there's poetry, there's narrative, and there's discourse. So we're going to look at some different strategy for those different types of text types. There's different strategies for those. Some across the board, the same thing, but there are some specific things. Okay, why is it important to look at structure? What does it reveal? Emphasis. And emphasis helps shape our understanding. Yes, that's right. And that's what we're going for there. Understanding so that we can then get to application. So we're going to look first at finding structure in poetry. So where do we find poetry in Scripture? Psalm, yeah, that's a big one. So we have it in the first 17 books are historical. The next 5 are poetical. So those you find poetry there. But where else do you find poetry? So that is, in a poetical book, yes. In the prophets, yes. So give me an example. Like what are you thinking when you're thinking of poetry?
Oh, just like the form.
The form of poetry. Okay, yep. There's a famous one in the Gospels. It's a song. Mary's song. Mary. Yeah. Okay. But it's within a narrative book. Okay. So we're going to look at one of those, but it's in the Old Testament. Let's turn to 1 Samuel, chapter 2. And we're going to look at the first 10 verses. So I'm going to set it up for you. I'm not going to make you look for the context of this passage. I'm going to tell you the context. So 1 Samuel is the book that's kind of a transitional book because we're going from the Judges period into the Kingdom period because we've had this time, this really dark time in the history of the God's people, of the Israelites, and they've been through these cycles of sin where they would sin, do what God told them not to do, and then God would raise up, they would cry out to God, God would provide a deliverer, a judge to deliver them, and then they would live peacefully. But then the cycle would start all over again. It happens 7 times in the book of Judges. And 1 Samuel opens up with the birth of that final judge. And there's going to be a transition here. So in the first few chapters, it gives us a story of Samuel's birth and childhood. He was the last judge. Now there's a woman named Hannah. This is his mother. So you already know the end of the story, okay? So there's this woman named Hannah, and she is barren. Her husband's other wife, and we're not going there, has a number of children, and she chides and provokes Hannah. And Hannah, it's very grievous for her. And Hannah goes to the sanctuary and pours out her heart to God and petitions God that he would give her a son. And she vows to give him back in service to God. So God blesses her with the son Samuel. And after she weans him at the age of 3, she returns to the sanctuary to fulfill her promise to God and offers Samuel in service there. Okay. In this passage, we see her song of praise to God. So I want you to look at this. I want you to look at this passage, 1 Samuel, what do I have here? 1 Samuel 2, 1-10. And I want you to look for structure of this passage. Look particularly at grammar. Okay, that's key here in poetry, is looking at grammar. So look at it, and when you're looking for structure, a lot of times it's really helpful to like go verse 1 to 2 is this, and verse, you're just kind of looking for a kind of a what's what. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that with a partner, and we'll come back together. Sorry, go ahead. Are you going to come up to Mike to do the mail? Okay, okay. At the end of my thing. Okay.
quotes
Yes. Yes.
at the front,
Uh-huh.
and then at the front,
Yes.
and then at the front,
Yes.
and at the back.
Yes.
So we're not quite sure. Is this just a reminder that this is still talking?
Yes,
Or
that's the song. Yeah.
well, I know the whole thing is,
Yes.
but then there's no end quote. It almost looks like.
No, because it's all one.
So then why are they adding the other ones?
Why are they adding what?
So shouldn't
Well,
it just be
because-
one at the end and
because
one
it-
at the beginning?
No. No. No, it's all part of the same song. Let me see what my,
We have ESV.
yeah, I do
Kim,
too.
Kim only had one at the beginning and one at the end. She
Yeah.
didn't have the other ones in the middle.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that were trying to.
Yeah, it is all of the song. Yeah.
It's just reminding us that she's still talking.
Yes, yeah, yeah, it's your praise song. Yeah. Okay, we need to move on or we're going to run out of time here. Okay. Okay, so we're looking for the structure. What'd you find? Did you find anything stick out to you with grammar? Contrast, okay, yes. The barren, and then the born, and then the has many is forlorn. Kills, brings to life. Okay, so we see compare and contrast. What else? Yes. And where do you see that? Beginning, yes. We see in verses 1 to 2, this is Hannah's personal testimony and what she's praising God for what he has done in her life. She's praising him for what he's done in her life. And then we see, I think in verses 3 to 9, what do you see there? Do you see
Not chastening the people who've been speaking ill of her and taunting her and stuff.
Okay, yep. And what do we see about God there?
She sees like herself in a place and then God is above that.
Yes, okay.
There's God who knows. And by him she the way.
Yes. So we're basically seeing who God is and what he does. Okay? And then, did you notice the verb tense change? Did you see from 9 to 10 it changed from what he is and does to what he will do? Okay? And so we see these verbs of future tense. So now what do we see revealed here? Is it about a woman who asked God for something and she got it? Is that what the emphasis is here? No. We see this reminder of God's sovereignty and of his power and of his grace. So we're looking at God's character, right? We're seeing an emphasis on God's character. So now this song, this poetry is inside of a narrative. Okay, and we talked about, I gave you a little bit of the context of 1 Samuel, those opening chapters, the narrative, the story of Hannah's pain. So we're going to look at just a strategy on how to find structure in a narrative very quickly. And do you remember back in your English class? Anybody, is any English teachers in here? No. Okay, so good. Okay, so narrative's basically a story. And where do we find this type of text? These stories, where do we find it? What type of text where do we find narrative text? The historical books? Yeah. What was that? Yes, okay, well, it's specifically in the Bible. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Yes, so we find it in the historical books. We find it in some of the prophets. We hear these stories. There's stories, I mean, in the prophets, the Daniel, in the lion's den, and so forth. So if you remember back to your English class, a narrative has a plot arc. Does that sound familiar? Ringing any bells? Okay, so a plot arc, basically, we have a setting. And if you see on your sheet, I've got those right here. Setting, conflict, climax, resolution, and then a new setting. That's kind of the plot arc of a story. And so that's what kind of what you're looking for in these stories in the Bible. So in a narrative, but remember what the structure reveals. What does the structure reveal? An emphasis. So, and just as in poetry, you're looking at things and looking at a lot of grammar, here you're looking at that plot arc and you're going to see what this structure is going to reveal. So I don't think we have time to look at this one. Do we? What time? 12:30. Okay. So, well, let's do that. Okay, 1 Samuel 1:1 through 2:11. You're going to look for the lay of the land. Look at the setting. Look at the setting. And so I'm going to actually, let's go through it together. Okay, so verses 1 through 5, what do you see as the setting? When you're looking at setting, you're looking at characters, you're looking at where are they. So what do you see in that part? You can just call it out if you want to.
Hill country.
Yes. Okay. Who do we see? What's the story about? Who is the story about? Yeah, there's some names there that are hard to pronounce. So basically they're setting up of who he is, where he came from, what he's doing. And then we get to verse 6. And 6 through 18 show us conflict. What's the conflict? Oh, rival, yes. Her rival, yes. Hannah's wife-in-law? No, I don't know what to call it. Provoking her because she doesn't have any children and they do. Okay, or the other woman does. Okay, so we've got this conflict, and then we're gonna get to a resolution eventually. So we read through 6 through 18, kind of give us the story of this conflict, and then in verse 119, we get to the climax of the story. And what is that? Yes. She petitioned God for a son, and she wanted to give her son back to the Lord. And so that's really the peak of the story, and then we're going to come to some resolution. Verses 119 through 210. What's the resolution? She has the baby, and then what? She takes him in to give him in service to the Lord after she weans him. So she had him 3 years, and then she takes him back to the sanctuary and puts him under the care of Eli. So that's the new setting. We have a new setting where Samuel is now in place there under Eli. So what emphasis do we see through this structure? What's the emphasis here?
Can it be a different emphasis based off of our plot arc? Because it seems more like God's provision and answer to prayer.
Okay. So her God answering her prayer, is that what you're saying? Okay. God did answer her prayer, but what do we see happening here? What's happening in Israel? I mean, where are we going from what to what? We will see as we go through 1 Samuel, right here we see that now here's Samuel in place, and we see that all this time God is at work. He's at work to raise up a godly man who's going to usher the nation, or not the nation yet, but usher his people into this kingdom age. And in the kingdom age, I know this is part of the context, but in the kingdom age, that's when the throne is established. And that's where the eternal throne is established with David. And that's the throne that Jesus sits on, okay? So we've got God working here. There's an emphasis in God working Even though Hannah can't see what God's doing, we see that God is at work and that he is faithful. And the last thing, in discourse, that's the third type of text structure is discourse. That's letters and speeches. And you see them in different places. Of course, you know the letters, but there's speeches throughout. And so the key to structure in discourse is all about grammar, but it's about crafting words to persuade the audience. So there's going to be logical progressions and building an argument. So we won't go through that, but you've got a practice exercise you can do on your own there in Titus. And then I'm going to close with structure is so important as it reveals to us the emphasis, and that will shape our understanding of the author's intended meaning. Once we understand the author's intended meaning to them, then we are on our path to finding true application to us now. So that's why context and structure are both important.